Okay, so there we go. Now we've got the recording going. All right. We are going to start this evening. We've got a couple of topics for discussion that are actually really relevant to this time of year. It is October, believe it or not. The weather has finally broke and turned the corner for us here in Texas. We've been experiencing a lot of really hot weather, and it finally cooled off on us this week. So everybody is, it's funny because all the Training Peak comments and all the workout comments were like, oh my goodness, I feel so great. I'm running so fast. My heart rate's 20 beats lower. It's like, yeah, just the temperature and the humidity finally dropped and everybody's feel much better about this stuff. We also have several people on the team who are still gearing up for a few late season races. So some of us are still in the game and getting ready to race over the next couple of months. We've got a really busy October and November. Like I said, Natasha is in Hawaii. We've got Kona coming up this week. The following week after that, we're going to be in Waco for a big weekend for Waco, Ironman Waco, and Ironman and 70.3 Waco as well. And then the very next weekend, I think the next weekend after that is St. George World Championships, 70.3 World Championships. If it's not that weekend, it's another weekend after that. Then we've got Ironman Florida in November, and then we've got Ironman Arizona in November as well. We got a bunch of team members who are going to be there at that race because it is a team race. So the topic for discussion tonight is going to be geared mostly around how to approach the off season. Andrea and Keeghan are going to lead us on that conversation. They're going to start us off with that. Before we get into that, though, I want to take just about 5 minutes and go over a basic bike technology or bike skill or bike maintenance topic, whatever you want to call it. This topic has come up a few times over the last couple of months, and I wanted to address it here just briefly. And that is the topic of cross-chaining. So cross-chaining is on your bike when you are in the big ring in the front, and then your chain is also in the big ring in the back. So if you're in the biggest ring in the front and the biggest ring in the back, you are cross-chaining. It also works the other way. If you're in the small ring in the front and also down in the smallest ring in the back, you are also cross-chaining. And cross-chaining is just exactly what it sounds like, right? The chain is coming at a diagonal, at the most severe diagonal angle that it can come from the front chain ring to the back cassette. And we want to avoid cross-chaining. Cross-chaining is a bad thing. We want to avoid that, right? There's several reasons why we want to avoid it. A lot of those are just mechanical efficiency of the drive chain itself, causes a lot more friction, and it doesn't work efficiently when you are in the big ring in the front and also the big ring in the back, or the small ring in the front and also the small ring in the back. The other thing, and in my opinion, probably slightly more important than the mechanical inefficiency, is when you are in that gear, either the big ring and big or the small and the small, you have nowhere to go. You are locked into a gear that if the terrain of the course that you're on, whether you're on a training ride or in a race, if it changes dramatically or quickly, you're stuck in a gear that you can't get out of without fumbling over 3 or 4 gears at least. So what that means is if you're in the big chain ring in the front and the big chain ring in the back, typically you wind up there because the road is getting harder and harder and harder. You were in the big chain ring to begin with, and you're just clicking up into easier gears into the back. The next thing you know, you're in your biggest cog in the back in the rear cassette. And now if the road continues to get harder, you're stuck. You've got nowhere to go. The only thing you can do is click down into the small chain ring in the front. And when you do that, it's a dramatic gear change. You skip over 3 or 4 gears depending on your component setup, okay? So if you are stuck in that situation, then what you want to do before you click down into the small ring in the front is to click back down into a couple of harder gears in the back. And when you do that, you're burning a match, right? You're just making it harder on yourself when you don't need to. Then you would be able to click down into the small ring in the front without skipping 5 or 6 gears. You're going to fumble a little bit, but you're going to fumble less when you do it that way. Same thing for the opposite direction. If you're in the small ring in the front and the smallest ring in the back, you ended up there because the road was getting faster and you were clicking down in the back and it was getting easier and you were getting faster and faster. Next thing you know, you're in the smallest ring in the back. And if you want to shift up into the big ring in the front, you're going to skip 4 or 5 gears. So the smart thing to do from there is to shift up in the back towards the middle of the cassette, then shift back up into the big ring in the front, and then come back down in the back. That, again, is inefficient. You're going to fumble around when you do that. It takes more time. You are going to most likely spin out for at least several revolutions of the pedals, and you're going to get dropped or you're going to lose your pace or what have you. So to avoid cross chaining, you need to anticipate. You need to look and say, okay, the road is going to continue to get harder up there. When you're clicking up into the gears in the back to make it easier, as soon as you get to one of those 3 or 4 middle gears in the back, that's when you want to shift down to the small chainring in the front. The most efficient way to shift down to the smaller chainring in the front or up into the big chainring in the front is to do it when you are in the middle of the cassette in the back. And you've got 3 or 4 gears in the back that would be considered the middle range. If your chain is in that middle range in the back, that's when you want to shift up and down in the front. That's going to be the most efficient way to do it. And you'll be smooth. Your cadence will continue to stay close to the same or where you want your cadence to be. And it's just going to be mechanically most efficient. And you want to try to avoid getting yourself into those situations where you're cross chaining. Okay. Is that clear? Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? Do any of the other coaches want to add something to that? Maybe I forgot something. No, pretty good. Okay, we got it. Nobody's going to cross chain anymore. Everybody knows what that means. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea and Keeghan. They're going to talk to you guys about how to approach the off season.
All right. Hello, everyone. So yeah, we wanted to talk about off season as we are approaching off season. Like Harold said, some people still have some races. Sorry if there's some traffic noise in the back. People still have some races the rest of this year, but for some people, they're already in their off season. And so we just wanted to talk about why it's important to really cherish your off season and some tips to kind of get through it and whatnot. So it's important to take this time really, one, to not only recover your body, but your mind. You know, you've been going the whole year, you've been training hard, you've been going to every single workout or mostly every workout, you've been hitting all these numbers. And so mentally, it's just a good time to kind of take a rest from that, take a step back from it. Off season is also a really good time to work on certain deficiencies that you might have, whether that be swimming or biking or running, or, you know, let's say in the gym, you really need to work on your strength. So it's a great time to kind of zone in on that. And so we just kind of wanted to talk about each one of those.
Yeah, so taking time off, I think, is a really important one for relationships, because you can also focus on being there for your significant other, or, you know, spending more time with your family if you need to be, because they might have sacrificed a lot for you while you were doing your Ironman prep. So even like post Ironman Arizona, like, you know, you've been really pushing. We're in like the heart of it right now. So right now, stay focused. But when it is time to take some time off or take unstructured training, I think it's really important to do that, to reset for the significant others and the people that are there for you, but also for your own mindset, so that when you do restart, you want to be hungry again. My rule of thumb when I finish is I do unstructured training. I just do what I want to do that day. So I might go, I really want to bike, and I'll just go bike. And I don't have a plan like what I'm going to do tomorrow. I just wake up and have what I want. And usually when I do that, I talk to my coach and say, I need 2 weeks of just this, and then I'll come back and I'm ready to do it again, or wherever the number is for you. You discuss that with your coach, but I think it's really important to just do what you want to do rather than doing what's expected that day, so that we can get out of the monotony of training. And then the other thing that I like to do as well is, like, sometimes I hate the pool, and I will wait until I get the want to be back in the pool. And once I realize that when I get that want or that desire back, that's when I'll start to do it again, or talk to my coach and say, hey, like, do I need to get back in? And again, but I think it's just a really good thing to reset the body, the mind, let it catch back up, so that when you are in the thick of it, you're there and you're ready to go, so that you're not pushing during this off season.
And I think it's really tough too, because, you know, we are people that are training 2 to 3 times in one day. And so when you get to this off season, you almost feel like lazy, but you're not. To tell you guys the truth, the top pros take about a month where they just, some of them don't do anything. They won't even run a step. And so they come back, and like Keeghan said, they're ready, they're hungry. So yeah, just talk to your coach on that. And then kind of choosing a specific sport to really focus in and zone in on. You know, a lot of people will sign up for running races because it's such a great time in the heart of the season for running, to do those longer runs, to sign up for if you want to do a half marathon, or let's say you want to get a 10K PR, you can really focus on that running, where maybe the bike and swim can come down a little bit, but you can still use those as kind of some cross training to supplement to focus on the running or wherever it might be.
Yep, especially take advantage of the colder weather. So right now, if we're seeing that everyone's running faster and their heart rates are lower, take advantage of that. Try to see and push the needle of where that sport might be. I think that's really important, especially around here in Texas. You have the big races coming up. You know, you got the Austin Half, you have 3M, you have, there's even like in California, you get CIM, you got really big marathons and half marathons and 10Ks that you can go, you know, participate in and try to get those PRs. And it doesn't have to be running. Again, talk to your coach at where your deficit might be. It's really the time to say, hey, maybe I want to increase my FTP, which again, we'll hand it off to Harold here eventually. You can get that through lifting. You can get that through specific cycling. You can get that through a lot of different ways. But if you say, hey, my FTP is not where it needs to be, let's try to increase that. And then that's where your coach can design it with you and go, we will still run and swim, but we won't put the focus on it as much. Meaning like, you know, usually if you have that, you usually have a hard bike and then a hard run the next day. If you're focusing on that run, that bike will be easier so that you can hit that run. So that way you can really make gains in the deficits, but then also keep the fitness on the other one so that you don't lose the strength. You don't want to lose it, but you also want to be able to focus and be able to maximize that time and efficiency to be able to get better at where you're deficient.
So that's kind of the majority of what we would say during the off season, you know, and the final thing is really to just enjoy it, take a step back. You know, holidays are during off seasons, be there, be present. Like I said, I know as triathletes, we're go all the time. And this is part of the year that you can, you know, go a little less and you're not any less of an athlete by doing that.
You can take Christmas off and you're not losing any gains, or you can take Thanksgiving off and you're not losing any gains. So enjoy those parts of it because you've earned it, but then also know you are still making gains, and the off season is still very important. Important in the sense of like with strength training. I think Harold's going to go really into it. I think that would be almost the number one in my mind, if you can make strength gains, because if you can get that, you can make it normal when you go into the normal season. I think Harold will be able to take that away, but it's a huge time to make massive gains. So don't take a step back, but also realize it's also important, but it's a different kind of important. So With that, I'll hand it off to Harold.
All right, guys, nice work. Nice work. Before we start talking about the strength training stuff for the off season, just to kind of piggyback on what they were saying, I would like to add a couple of things to that. And that is a couple of mistakes that I see people make often when they're approaching their off season. And it kind of comes from a place where it's going to be individual to each athlete. And these mistakes are kind of under umbrella or often made by big groups of people, but they're made a little bit differently from person to person. And what that means basically is if you're Keeghan or you're Andrea or you're Simon and you don't want to swim for a month over the winter, that's probably going to be okay. You'll be able to get back into the pool a month later, work your way back into it, and you'll be fine for the next season. If you're me, or if you're Brandon, or if you're Katie, you may not want to do that. You may want to stay in the pool and continue to work through the winter because you need to touch the water and you need to touch it often. Now, you don't have to swim hard. You don't have to swim a lot of volume, but you need to be in the pool with some kind of consistency and some kind of frequency. Early when I started doing triathlon every year, November, I'd say, screw this, I'm not swimming. I hate it. I don't want to go back to the pool. We'd be back in the pool the next year, maybe February or March, getting ready for an April race. And then every year after that, I would wonder why I was never getting any better at swimming. If you're not getting it better swimming and you want to get better at swimming, you're going to need to swim throughout the winter. It is what it is. Okay. Now, if you understand this and you are okay with maybe not making the gains in the swim and you still want to take that time away from the pool during the winter, then by all means do it. If that's what you need to do to recharge your batteries and keeps you sane through the winter is not swimming, and that's perfectly fine, then do that. But also next year when you start back up, also know that it's going to be quite a bit of a climb to get back into that rhythm with your swim training. Now that's specific just to the swim. You could carry that over to the bike or the run as well. Maybe not as dramatic for those of us who don't have a swim background, but like Andre and Keeghan said, also the second mistake that I wanted to talk about, the winter months are the running season. That's when the marathons are. That's when the runners are hitting their peak and we're hitting our off season. So if you want to do running races, that's the time to do it, right? This is fun. You're going to have lots of opportunities. The weather is dropping, so that's more ideal for those of us who live in the South and it's hot all summer. But if you have an early season Ironman the following year, say you're racing Ironman Texas in April, and you're looking at doing a marathon in March, then you need to make sure that you're weighing those two things out correctly as well, because you can't focus on both of those things truly at the same time. You can focus on the Ironman and do the marathon as kind of like a training part of leading up to the Ironman. But if you focus solely just on that marathon, then it's going to be crunch time to get ready for the Ironman. Right after that, you're going to have a quick turnaround. And I'll tell you this, if you run a marathon, standalone marathon, and you focus on that over the winter, and you go and you have a good race, you race to your performance level, then you're going to need some recovery from that. You're probably going to need more recovery from that than what you would need from doing an Ironman if you race to your performance. So if you're a decent runner and you run a marathon, you're going to need some recovery time after that. So now we're looking at kind of taking another mini off season off of our off season that we just took. And if our focus is triathlon, especially looking at doing an early season Ironman the following year, then you need to take that in consideration and kind of think that out with your coach and approach it. Now, it can be done. It's tricky, but it can be done. Just be aware of that type of situation and how the two things relate to each other. Okay. Now we'll get to the thing that I really want to talk about, and that's getting in the gym and getting familiar with some barbells and some dumbbells. All right. So a lot of us during the season are maybe a little bit wary about doing the harder strength training because it creates a lot of soreness, and we've got track workout the next morning, or we still got our big Ironman coming up. Now we're in the off season. I say off season because we're not racing, but we're still training, right? So it's kind of a tricky term to use. But now's a good time for you to start to be familiar with, or start to work your way into some of those more strength inclusive strength training workouts that maybe you were trying to avoid earlier in the year. Getting under a barbell, doing some heavy squats, doing some heavy deadlifts, those exercises that make you really sore. Like Keeghan said, he hit the nail on the head. He said it perfectly. Now's the time to be sore from those things so that when you get back into the following season and you start to dial the strength training down a little bit, you've made an adaptation to that work. So now you can do lighter squats or lighter deadlifts during the season and it won't affect you as much, okay? And the programming on Train Heroic is going to reflect this. So if you're doing the strength training sessions on Train Heroic at the moment, we are in an in-season or a maintenance phase when it comes to strength training. That means that we are doing 3-week blocks of strength training with a recovery week on the back of that, and we're repeating that cycle, and we're just changing the strength exercises on the strength days on Wednesdays each cycle, okay? Now, as we're getting into the off season, and those strength exercises have been, you can approach them how you want to approach them, meaning that you don't have to necessarily go progressive overload and add weight to them each week. Although kudos to those who have been doing that because you're going to benefit from that. But say you're not comfortable with adding 5 or 10 pounds to your squats each week over that 3-week block, and you've been just using weights that you feel comfortable and that you can control. That's perfectly fine. Now that we're into the off season, that 3-week block is going to increase. We're going to go to a 4-week, then to a 5-week block. And we're going to add strength exercises into the workout that we've been doing. Like if you do that Wednesday session that's on Train Heroic right now, and you've got your system down, you've got a gym that you can navigate through quickly, you can get that session done in 45 minutes. I get it done here in my gym with 2 or 3 clients, and we get it done in 45 minutes. Andrea came over earlier this week. We had another workout partner. She worked out with 2 people, and they got it done in 45 minutes. We did every exercise. We added the weights onto the bar and did the whole thing. Now the strength training exercises in the off season are going to start to become a little more involved, and they'll take you a little bit more time. I'll recommend that you do the progressive overload and start to add the weight to a point where maybe you're a little bit uncomfortable with it, but you want to challenge yourself. You can be a little bit sore during this time, and that's perfectly fine. So look forward to the Train Heroic programming. The strength work on Wednesdays is going to start to get a little more aggressive, a little bit longer in terms of volume per session. And if you've done correctly, you're going to create a little bit of soreness from it, and the blocks of trainings are going to increase out so that you don't have a recovery week as frequently. Okay. That is going to start after we do our big team race at the end of November in Arizona. So start to look for that early December. Okay. If anybody has any questions specifically about how any of that strength training stuff relates to you and what you're trying to accomplish in triathlon for yourself, then just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to clarify any of that stuff up for you. But we're going to continue to do the mobility work on Monday. We're going to do the drills and skills, the little body work sessions on Tuesday and Thursday. They're about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll do the plyometrics on Friday, but the Wednesday sessions where we do strength are going to increase, and the blocks of training are going to get more involved and get a little bit longer. Okay. So if you're somebody who is doing an off-season marathon, and maybe you're trying to set a new PR in your marathon, and you don't have any Ironman races until the middle of the summer or late summer next year, and you want to see how to incorporate those two things, then just shoot me an email and we can definitely do it. I mean, look around at some of the hybrid athletes and some of, like, Nick and some of these other traditionally strength trained athletes who are coming into triathlon. They can do it just fine. Some of them are performing in triathlon at a pretty high level and doing really well with it. So you should have some confidence there that you can do a little more work in the gym and still come out of that on the backside getting better at triathlon as well. Okay. Do any of the coaches want to add anything to any of that stuff about off season, or does anybody have any questions about how to approach any of that stuff? Now's the time to ask.
I have one just kind of comment on the watching, like what Harold said. I love about, like, you want to do a marathon in March, but then you have Ironman Texas. Like, the same goes if you're doing Ironman Arizona or Ironman Florida, then you need to have a conversation with your coach before you sign up for, like, the Houston Marathon, because you might not be recovered enough for, like, an early season marathon either, coming off that, and then you don't want to have injury. So just make sure you're talking to your coach as you're signing up for really half marathon and full marathons in the off season. 5Ks and 10Ks, like, enjoy yourself, have fun, but the longer ones, just make sure you're communicating with your coaches just to make sure you are getting that recovery time that you really need after an Ironman.
Yeah, yeah, that's great, Katie. That's great. And the timing of how all this stuff plays out is very important, especially for those athletes who are looking at making the improvements over the years to get yourself to a situation where you want to be competitive, right? So a lot of you sitting out there watching this right now either want to qualify for Worlds, or you have already qualified for Worlds before and you want to qualify again and do better than you did last time. You kind of have that, I'm sure Simon has that 5-year plan, 7-year plan. He's looking out ahead. He's very young in the sport. He's got many years ahead of him. So all the timing of how all these things are related to each other becomes even more important when you're playing the long game. Now, if you're just in triathlon and you just want to have fun with it and you just want to do the events that you want to do, then that's perfectly fine. We can make all that happen as well. And you can just have a more relaxed approach to these things and just go enjoy yourself and do the events. For all of you serial racers out there, because there are a lot of you serial racers out there, and you just have fun with it. And you do, 30, 40, 50 races a year and everything is great. But for those who want to really kind of continue to improve, continue to get better, that those things need to be looked at.
And Harold, another thing that I had is bike fit. If you want to talk about that too, bike fit's a good one to work on the off season. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, actually, that's a really good point, Keeghan. And bike fit kind of is also going to be tied into a little bit of the work that you're doing in the gym. And that goes for those of us who are maybe trying to improve our swim stroke as well. When you look at bike fit or you look at swim stroke, one of your main hurdles, especially in bike fit from the very beginning, is just going to be the mobility aspect of it, right? Having the range of motion in your joints to be able to get your body into the position that's necessary to be fast on the bike aerodynamically and or to move yourself through the water quickly, right? So if you're lacking in shoulder mobility and you want to get better at the swim, then you need to increase that mobility. Over the winter months, over the off season is a great time to focus on that. So specifically when you're looking at shoulder mobility, on the Train Heroic training sessions, there is a dedicated session for shoulder mobility.
When you see that thing, it's 10 minutes long. Do it 3 or 4 days a week, right? Do your dead hangs, do your lateral raises, do those bandit exercise, your dowel stretch, do all that shoulder work. Find 3 or 4 of those exercises that you think you can improve on, that you're not so great at. Do them 4 or 5 days a week, every single week for all the weeks through the off season. And when you start to ramp up your swim training again next spring, you're going to see the benefits from that. Same thing with your bike fit, right? You're doing the mobility work. You're doing the shin box to increase your hip mobility. You're doing the straight leg hamstring stretches. You're doing the single leg RDLs. You're doing all those exercises to help you create mobility in your hips, create better posture through your spine. Shoulder mobility is also an issue. I think that's something that's quite underlooked when it comes to your bike fit and your position on the bike. And kind of piggybacking off of that, when you look at your CDA, your aerodynamic score, essentially, CDA stands for a coefficient of drag, but it's basically a score that tells you how aerodynamic you are on your bike. A couple of the major contributors to having a bad or a good score are going to be, one, how low you are in the front, and then number two, how close your elbows are together in the elbow pads. Okay, so these are a couple of things that you want to kind of maybe look at and try to improve upon. Some of you can lower yourself down in the front. You want to do it slowly, work on it over the off season by creating more mobility in your hips, better flexibility in your hamstrings, better posture through your thoracic spine. And then the other thing is going to be moving your elbows in closer together in your elbow pads. So a lot of us, are in our aero position. We're riding with our elbows way out here. You can improve on that. The closer you bring your elbows in, the more aerodynamic the front of your system is going to be. You want to do that slowly as well. Working on the shoulder raises, a lot of those shoulder exercises. The T-spine rotation is another good one that's going to help you in that area. And then you take your elbow pads on your bike and you move them in one screw, right? So if you take those Velcro pads off of your elbow pads and your aero in your cockpit, you'll see that there's a series of holes and screws of where your elbow pads go. And you can just move them in one notch, whatever the adjustment is, move it in one notch, ride your bike on the trainer with your elbows on there, continue to work on those mobility exercises. See if you can make that comfortable over the off season so that by the time the races come back around next spring or next year, you can be in that position and you're comfortable. Then do it again the following off season, right? Move your elbow pads in another notch. 2 or 3 years down the road, next thing you know, you're going to look like Jan Frodeno on the bike. You're going to be slick, flying through the air, smooth, aerodynamic. You're going to be able to touch your shoulders to your ears so that you can swim like Simon, and everything's going to be great. All right. If you're complaining about your fit or your swim stroke and your mobility sucks and you don't do any of the mobility exercises, I got no sympathy for you. Zero. Right. So, and I'm a guilty culprit here too. I know because I know, right? I need to do those exercises myself. I've improved my position on the bike over the years. I've improved in my swim stroke over 20 years. I'm still working on it. I'm still getting better. And it's going to come a lot from the mobility that you can do in the off season. And then the rest of it is all technique and fitness and stuff that you're already doing every year, right? So that's my piece on that. I'll get off my soapbox just a little bit there. We are right at 6:30. We have no questions in the chat, but I will give it up. Go ahead, Katie. You got something else?
Right. One more thing is Natasha sent an email about the ceramic speed that talked with us last week that we're extending that for another week because there was a lot of interest, but just not a lot of people ready to pull a trigger. So just so you know, that's extended through September 9th. And there's an email that went out, but it's 20% off discount. And then you're going to need to send inquiries to Bicycle World if you're interested in the ceramic speed. So she sent an email. If you have any questions, let us know. But I just wanted to make sure that y'all saw that. That's it.
All right. Perfect. All right. Thanks to everybody who joined us for the Zoom call tonight. Again, we'll have another guest star hosting next weekend because Natasha will still be in Kona. For this week, we discussed cross shading. None of you all are going to do it ever again in your life. You're going to be mechanically efficient through your drivetrain. We talked about how to approach the off season. Keeghan and Andrea got us all up to date on that, how to kind of move into that phase of the year. We talked specifically about how the strength training is going to go over those months as we get into the off season. And you guys are all ready to go for the end of November, 1st of December, when we, as a team, will officially go into all the off-season stuff then. But for those of you who are done racing for the year, you may have already started on these things. We do have one comment they just commented on here. Somebody in the call, Simon, just got all his ceramic speeds set up, and he said that it's dope, that you should get it, or it's hype, you should get it. So look at those marginal gains that you can get from those cool equipment with the discounts. It looks like it's a good idea. All right, everybody. So thanks for hanging out with us for 30 minutes, and we will see you next time. Cool. All right, let's see here.
Charles.
Are we staying on for anything? Are we good?
I mean, not unless you wanted to just hang out with me and talk, or if you need somebody to talk to, or
No.
or if you just want to let something out, then I'll listen. I mean,
Just a little
I'm
therapy
here.
session. No,
I'm
I got
here.
nothing. I got nothing. Hey, I think I want to see if John Couch will do a little changing flat demo for us next week.
That'd be perfect.
So, all right.
That would be great. I think anytime that we can start, when we're kind of running thin on things to talk about, I think if we have, if we can start with some kind of mechanical bike tip at the beginning of every talk, like I did with cross chaining, I think, those are things that me personally, I kind of take for granted. I just expect everybody to already know these things. But I also remember a time when I first started, when I didn't know what the hell that was, and I needed somebody to explain it to me. So I think those tips are great, and that'd be awesome. Get John on that. And then, let us know whatever you want to talk about. And if I can help in any way, just let me know, and I'll be on it with you too.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. I'll see you next week.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.